Hello there friends, I'm Kendra Winchester. Welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to be talking about the second half of the books that I read in February. So while the corgis frap over there, I'm just going to tell you about these books. Okay, so I didn't go over the challenges that I am doing for reading, and so we're going to go over those right now. And I'm going to do a quarterly wrap up of the books that I read for my short story a day challenge. And so this month I read Nothing Gold Can Stay by Ron Rash, and I also read Night Side of the River Ghost Stories by Jeanette Winterson. Now I have been talking about these more over on TikTok. I did join TikTok, yes. I caved, but also it's a fun time. I'm not gonna lie. So I've been sharing some of those here on YouTube Shorts, so you can check those out, but I do longer videos over there on TikTok. So I will link that in the description box. But these are the two short story collections that I read for February. And I originally thought I would go through, on average, about 3 short story collections a month, and that I'm averaging 2. So, I mean, there's been 2 months. But I've worked out like how many stories are in the collections I'm currently reading and all that. So I don't know if I'm going to get through as many short story collections as I first had imagined, but that's fine. We're still keeping up with the challenge. It's great. The other challenge I'm doing is this challenge where I am trying to read my backlist books. So I pulled 4 books for half of January and part of February. I finished one of those in January. I finished 2 of them in February. We'll talk about the other one in a second. I finished Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism by Bell Hooks. I really love Bell Hooks. I mean, she's phenomenal. She's also has a lot of Appalachian connections, and so I really love that about her work as well. I think this is one of the earliest books that she wrote. It's been reissued and has a new like introduction or forward or whatever it is. And this is just about intersectionality and feminism and the importance of intersectionality in feminism. It is a classic for a reason, and I absolutely loved it. And they're now actually slowly but surely coming on audio. So I've been able to read, I think 4 or 5 books by Bell Hooks so far, and I have even more coming down the pike, so stay tuned for those. We knew that would be amazing, right? It's Bell Hooks. The next one is Jessica J. Lee's Two Trees Make a Forest, In Search of My Family's Past Among Taiwan's Mountains and Coasts. And this book is really hard to describe because on one hand, part of it is excellent. The nature descriptions are great. I really love how she has these moments where she delves into her family's past and past history of like how her family fled China because of the Communist Revolution, eventually made it to Taiwan, and then eventually went to Canada. But I felt like this book had so many great moments, but there wasn't like a skeletal structure. There wasn't a structure to the book that compelled me to keep reading. It was more very episodic, almost like they were separate essays sometimes, and I really wanted like a through line, something that kept me wanting to move through the like memoir as a whole, and I just didn't have that. And so while her writing is beautiful and there are these moments about her family history that are fascinating, she writes about like nature writing of Taiwan's like unique ecosystem, how there are species there that aren't anywhere on earth because it's an island, and what that looks like. All that is completely fascinating, but I really struggled to have any desire to pick this book back up, or keep listening, I should say, because it just wasn't there. And Nancy Wu is a phenomenal narrator. She did a great job, so it definitely not on her end. I just really wish this had more of a structure to it. I would pick up another book by this author to see if like they progressed and that way, to see if they would add structure. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now you might notice that there is not another book in this, as there should be, and I realized that 6 weeks for 4 books was a bit much. So what we're going to do is we're going to add it to March, and so that way I'm making up for January, which I completely missed because it started late. We're going to roll it into that, and I think that is fair. It's also a shorter novel. It's To Keep the Sims Alive by Rabia Ghaffari, which I have been waiting to listen to for years, so like I'm going to give it another chance for sure. So we're gonna move it there. March is so busy with so many conferences, but I'm confident that it'll be a good time. So those are the books for my different challenges. Those are the updates there. We're now going to look at a couple books that I listened to for Read or Dead, the mystery, thriller, and horror podcast that I co-host for a Book Riot. So we did this whole theme on books inspired by True Detective Night Country, which I really enjoyed watching. It is phenomenal, and it has so many great themes about indigeneity and the importance of indigenous communities. It looks into the murdered and missing women, girls, and non-binary folks, and it just looks at these big ideas that are really important to look at while also telling a great story. And the characters are just completely fascinating. It is my favorite season of True Detective so far, for sure. So what we did was we looked at two books. It's basically, I think, structurally a duology, and that is City Under One Roof and Village in the Dark, which are both by Irish Nyamashita. And so these two books are really fascinating because you have a detective. Her husband and her son have gone missing. And so it's been a year. She's been put on medical leave because her mental health is in the trash, understandably. And so she goes up to this one town that's through this mountain tunnel, and everyone lives in the same building. And it's, in rural Alaska. There's such a small community there. And so some body parts have washed up on the shore. And she says that looks like what some of the evidence was of when her husband's son went missing. So she's going up there. And so the first book really delves into her meeting this community and some of the mystery that goes on there. And then the second book continues that and really looked at what happened to her husband and son and what all the complications that were involved in that. And I thought these books were fine. There were, the writer is a screenwriter and is a Oscar-nominated screenwriter, and you can tell these are very cinematic, these are very plot-driven, and they're just a good time type stories. But I really love characters, and I really wanted to love the characters a bit more, and I felt they were kind of little cookie cutters type characters. And while I think this would make a great mini series or a movie or something, I just was really lacking in that area for me. There's also a disabled woman that's featured more heavily in the first book. We're not really told what she has. It's really vague, but she could be autistic, or she could have some sort of intellectual disabilities or something like that. And in the second book, it kind of touches that on a second, and the people in town don't know, and they don't really care. They just accept her as she is. So on one hand, I feel like the representation could have been better as far as this character, but also the community just accepts her, and there's community care and support there that I really appreciate, that they just don't really care what it's called. They're going to feed her, they give her food, they, give her the space she needs to figure things out. It's there are good things and bad things, I guess, about that. So I'd be interested to see what other disabled people thought about it, particularly autistic readers, what they thought of the character. So those are those two books. They're okay. I talk more about them on Read or Dead, so I will link that episode down in the description box. Okay, so the last book I have to tell you about this month is one of my favorites. I think it might tie with The Warm Hands of Ghosts for my favorite read of the month, and that is The Book of Love, a novel by Kelly Link. This is a very long book. It is, I don't know how many pages. I think it's close to 600. Yeah, it's just over 600 pages. And so this book looks at 3 teenagers that disappear from Love's End, Massachusetts, which is a seaside town. And so we start in this otherworldly in-between place where the keepers of the door of life and death, they are kind of having this wager. It felt very much like mythology, old gods having a wager at the expense of mortals, which is essentially what it is. So these characters find out that they have died, and so to be able to stay in life, they are going to have to kind of compete with each other, and 2 of them will stay in life and 2 will stay in death. And the 4th member of that quartet is this unknown entity. And so part of the book is figuring out who this other person is. So these characters go back, and their families have no memory that they have left. So Laura's sister Susanna is also a major character in this book, but each chapter and the viewpoint is like the book of Daniel, the book of Laura, the book of Susanna, and that you can move through the novel that way. Kelly Link is a Pulitzer Prize finalist for her short stories. I absolutely love her short stories. And so this is her debut novel, and it is perfect for those who like, a more realistic setting, but then like magical or supernatural things happen in that setting, so like a low fantasy vibe. And so I really loved this book. There's so much about the characters that I loved. I loved that it was almost like a modern fairy tale. That is really Kelly Link's jam, is these dark fairy tales. And I just felt really consumed by this story. And all I could think about was this book while I was reading it. And I could not wait to pick it back up again. It's just phenomenal. January Lavoie reads the audiobook and just did a great job with it. She was able to embody so many different characters and really capture the personalities. And I don't want to tell you anything else about the book and the plot because it is so fascinating to learn more about them. I think I read maybe a couple sentences of the synopsis of this book before I jumped into it, and it's so good. So I cannot recommend it more. It is just a fascinating story. And so I need to talk to other people about it. So if you've read it, let me know. We need to talk about it because I don't know anyone else who's read it yet. I haven't had the chance, I should say, to talk to anyone else who's read it yet. So that is The Book of Love by Kelly Link. So those are the books that I read in February. Thank you all for joining me. It was an okay reading month. I hope there are fewer like 3-star reads and more 5-star reads in March, but we'll see. Until then, I'll see you in the next one. Bye, friends.